I spent years thinking omega-3 was something you had to buy. Fish oil capsules lined up in bathroom cabinets, flaxseed meal measured into morning smoothies, chia pudding prepped in mason jars. I never questioned it. Omega-3 felt like one of those modern necessities, something your body needs but can't quite produce on its own, at least not efficiently. So you supplement, you purchase, you depend. But about 8 months ago, I stumbled across a number that stopped me cold. 64%. That's the percentage of alpha-linolenic acidola omega-3 found in the seeds of a particular plant, not 10%, not 20%, 64%. For context, flaxseed, which everyone knows as an omega-3 powerhouse, hovers around 55%. Chia comes in lower. And here was this plant, quietly outperforming both, with seeds packed so densely with essential fatty acids that it seemed almost engineered for human nutrition. Except it wasn't engineered at all. It's been growing, reseeding itself, feeding families for centuries in parts of Asia, largely unnoticed by the rest of us. I didn't set out to investigate forgotten plants. I'm not a botanist, I don't run a homestead or live off-grid, but I've always been curious about self-sufficiency, not in a survivalist way, more in a practical sense. What if the things we think we need to buy are actually just things we've forgotten how to grow? That question led me down a path I didn't expect. Into seed catalogs, agricultural journals, traditional Asian cuisine, and eventually into my own backyard. The plant I'm talking about is called Perilla. You might know it as shiso if you've ever ordered Japanese food. Seen those delicate purple or green leaves garnishing sashimi or tucked into rice bowls? But what most people don't realize is that those leaves are just the beginning. The seeds, small, dark, unassuming, are where the real story lives. Perilla frutescens has been cultivated for over 1,000 years, primarily in Korea, Japan, China, and parts of Southeast Asia. It was grown not for decoration, not as a novelty herb, but as a staple. A crop families returned to because it gave more than it asked for. When I first read about Perilla seed oil, I assumed it was some niche superfood being sold in tiny bottles at inflated prices. And yes, you can find it that way, but that's not the point. The point is that this plant grows easily, asks for almost nothing, and gives you seeds so rich in omega-3 that traditional farmers in Korea used to press them into oil for cooking, for medicine, for preservation. They didn't need a laboratory to tell them it was valuable, they just knew. I ordered seeds online, a small packet, maybe $2. I wasn't expecting much. I planted them in a corner of my yard that gets partial sun, soil that's decent but nothing special. I watered them once after planting, then mostly ignored them. Within 2 weeks, green shoots pushed through. Within a month, the plants were knee-high, branching out with broad, serrated leaves that smelled faintly of mint and basil. By midsummer, they were chest-high, flowering in long spikes of tiny white and purple blooms. And by early fall, those flowers had turned into seed heads, heavy and drooping, filled with thousands of tiny seeds. Here's what surprised me most. I didn't replant them the next year. I didn't have to. The seeds fell. They scattered into the soil, settled into cracks, waited through winter, and when spring came, they sprouted again. Not in neat rows, but in clusters, in unexpected places, along the fence, near the compost bin, in the gravel path. Perilla doesn't need you to save it. It saves itself. I started reading deeper. I wanted to understand what made this plant so resilient, why it thrived where other things struggled. What I found was a combination of factors that, together, make Perilla almost uniquely suited for small-scale linput cultivation. It's drought-tolerant, once established. It grows in poor soil. It doesn't require fertilizers or pesticides. In fact, it tends to repel certain pests naturally. Deer avoid it. Insects largely leave it alone. It's not invasive in the aggressive sense, but it is persistent. It finds a niche and fills it. But the real revelation was attritional. I knew the omega-3 content was high, but I didn't fully understand what that meant until I started comparing. Alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA, is the plant-based form of omega-3. Your body converts some of it into EPA and DHA, the forms found in fish oil, but not at a particularly high rate, maybe 5% to 15%, depending on your genetics, diet, and overall health. That's why some nutritionists still push marine sources. But ALA itself has value. It's anti-inflammatory. It supports cardiovascular health. And if you're consuming enough of it, your body has more material to work with for those conversions. Perilla seeds contain roughly 60 to 64% ALA by weight. That's not just high, it's extraordinary. For comparison, flaxseed is around 55%, chia around 18%, and hemp around 20%. Walnuts, often cited as a good plant source, come in at about 9%. Perilla is in a category of its own. And yet, if you walk into most health food stores in the West, you won't see it. You'll see flax, you'll see chia, you'll see algae-based DHA supplements, but Perilla, rarely. I started asking why. Not in a conspiratorial way, not interested in that kind of thinking, but genuinely, why isn't this more widely known? The answer, as far as I can tell, isn't sinister. It's just boring marketing, familiarity, inertia. Flaxseed became popular in North America because it was already being grown here, already part of agricultural infrastructure. Chia got a boost from fitness culture and clever branding. Fish oil had decades of research and an entire supplement industry behind it. Perilla had none of that. It stayed where it started in Asian kitchens, traditional medicine, small family gardens. It never crossed over, not because it wasn't valuable, but because no one was selling it hard enough. And maybe that's the point. Perilla doesn't need to be sold. It grows, it spreads, it feeds, it asks for almost nothing, and gives relentlessly. For those who want to explore which nutrient-dense medicinal plants can be grown at home, we left a guide in the first link in the description with the best options for backyard growing. This isn't about replacing medical advice or pretending one plant solves everything. It's about recovering a kind of knowledge that used to be common, that food and medicine don't always come from stores. I harvested my first batch of seeds in late September. I didn't have a proper plan. I just cut the seed heads, let them dry in a paper bag, then rubbed them between my hands to release the seeds. They're small, about the size of a poppy seed, black or dark brown, slightly sticky with natural oils. I tasted one. It was nutty, faintly bitter, a little bit peppery. I toasted a handful in a dry pan, and the smell filled the kitchen earthy, warm, almost like sesame but richer. I ground some into a coarse meal and stirred it into oatmeal. I pressed a small batch into oil, using a hand crank press I found secondhand. The oil came out golden, viscous, with a flavor that reminded me of roasted nuts and fresh-cut grass. I used it in salad dressings, drizzled it over steamed vegetables, mixed it into homemade hummus. It didn't taste like fish oil. It didn't taste medicinal. It just tasted good, like something that belonged in food, not a supplement bottle. I kept a jar of seeds on the counter. I'd sprinkle them on rice, into soups, over roasted squash. My partner started using the leaves in summer rolls, in stir-fries, as a garnish for ramen. We weren't trying to be purists or revolutionize our diet. We were just using what we had, and what we had was abundant. By the second year, the plants had spread further. I didn't plant any new seeds. I didn't need to. They came back on their own, stronger, denser, in places I hadn't anticipated. I gave handfuls of seeds to neighbors, to friends who garden, to anyone curious. Most of them had never heard of Perilla. A few recognized it from restaurants, but didn't know it could be grown at home. One friend planted it in containers on her apartment balcony. It thrived. Another let it naturalize in a corner of his vegetable garden. It filled in gaps, shaded out weeds, attracted pollinators. What I've come to understand is that Perilla isn't special because it's exotic. It's special because it's resilient. It doesn't need perfect conditions. It doesn't need you to baby it. It just needs a little space, a little time, and it does the rest. That kind of self-sufficiency is rare in modern gardening, where so much is about control amendments, schedules, interventions. Perilla grows despite you, not because of you. And in that, there's a kind of quiet power. I started thinking about other plants like this. Plants that used to be common, that fed people, that required almost no input and gave tremendous output, but that somehow fell out of favor. Amaranth, lamb's quarters, purslane, not weeds, not pests, but food, nutritious, resilient, free. They didn't disappear because they stopped being useful. They disappeared because we stopped paying attention. If discovering resilient, nutrient-dense plants like this changed the way you think about food independence, check the first link in the description. We placed a guide showing medicinal plants you can grow in your own backyard. This isn't about going off-grid or rejecting modern agriculture. It's about options. It's about knowing that some of the most powerful nutrition doesn't require a supply chain. I won't pretend Perilla is a miracle. It's not going to cure disease. It's not a replacement for a balanced diet or medical care, but it is a reminder that we've outsourced things we used to know how to do ourselves. We've forgotten that seeds can carry not just genetics, but knowledge about how to feed yourself, how to be less dependent, how to work with the land instead of against it. The leaves are edible, flavorful, medicinal in traditional contexts. The seeds are one of the richest plant sources of omega-3 available. The oil is stable, versatile, delicious. The plant itself is beautiful, attracts beneficial insects, improves soil, and reseeds without human intervention. And yet, most people have never heard of it. That's not a conspiracy. It's just what happens when we stop teaching each other how to grow food, when we assume everything worth having must be bought. I've had people ask me if growing Perilla is worth the effort. My answer is always the same. What effort? You plant it once. Maybe you don't even plant it, scatter seeds and let them figure it out. You water it if it's dry, but it'll survive without you. You harvest it when it's ready, or you don't, and it'll come back next year anyway. The effort is minimal. The return is generous. I think about the farmers in Korea who grew this plant not because it was trendy, but because it worked, because it came back, because the seeds pressed into oil that lasted through winter, because the leaves added flavor to meals when vegetables were scarce, because it asked for so little and gave so much. That kind of relationship with food feels increasingly rare. We've built systems that prioritize convenience and shelf life over resilience and nutrition. And in doing so, We've lost touch with plants like Perilla plants that don't need packaging, don't need shipping, don't need anything except soil and time. Sometimes the most powerful nutrients don't come from a bottle. They come from a seed you can hold in your hand, plant in your yard, watch, grow, harvest, eat, and watch return the next year without any help from you. That's not just nutrition, that's autonomy, that's knowledge made physical, and it's available to anyone willing to pay attention. If this story resonated with you, if it made you curious about what else might be growing quietly, unnoticed, packed with nutrition and resilience, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. There's so much more to explore: plants, techniques, forgotten knowledge that's waiting to be remembered. This is just the beginning. Let's keep digging, let's keep planting, let's keep learning what our grandparents knew and we forgot. Thank you for watching.